Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about bosses and rumors. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, I want to be a programmer, but I've heard this rumor and I hear all of these people talking about how it is to work with horrible bosses, and it's kind of making me unsure about whether or not this is for me. So I think that we need to just state something, and because this is the quick answer. My friend, every single human being is different. I know it's a shocker. If you're not sitting down, then you should sit down for this one. Because basically what I'm telling you is that if a bunch of people are telling you that your boss or that it's very often that you have bad managers and shitty bosses and stuff like that, as a programmer, let's just start off by saying that if that was the case, it would not be unique in any way to being a programmer. There are people who are suffering under bad management all over the place, in every single company all over the planet. Odds are that you may or may not find yourself working with someone who isn't all that happy to, isn't all that nice to you. And that doesn't have to be a boss. It can be a coworker, it can be pretty much anybody. One thing that is worth knowing though is that the odds of finding such an individual is higher in industries and companies where there is a where the person in question feels a lack of ownership or a sense of responsibility and purpose. The closer you can get to a company or an industry or so forth where people actually feel an emotional connection to the things that they are doing, the likelier they are to actually be very nice and be very caring people. Now, one thing to know there as well is that, of course, it's a bit of a balancing act because people can truly care about their profession and their job, but if they're under a lot of stress and they're not really a good fit for that environment, they can still manifest these sorts of issues that they have on the inside in bad behavior. But this is not unique in any way, and I will tell you that there is no reason for you at all to think that your boss is going to be this asshole type of person who's going to mistreat you just because you are a programmer. This is a risk that everybody faces at every single company. I would even go one further and I would say that the odds of you being able to avoid working under such an individual is actually very high. Probably higher in programming than in most other professions. Not because the people who are working within software development are necessarily good people or better people than in another industry, but as a software developer, you have a lot of choice these days. There is a lot of offers on the table for quite a lot of programmers. You can pick pretty much where you want to work if you know what you're doing. Which means that for you, if you actually do find yourself in a situation where you have a manager or a coworker that you don't really fit with and you can't solve the issues by working through them at that place of work, well, then you can switch jobs. That is an option that not that many other professions have, or rather where the cost-benefit evaluation or the cost-benefit ratio is kind of off because most people are not so it's not an easy thing to just find a new job for quite a lot of people, so most people will simply bite down and just kind of churn through a bad relationship with somebody and just suffer through it. And I mean, that's not something that's not going to happen in programming as either. It's just that you yourself have to decide if it's worth it for you, or if the situation is so bad then it's unresolvable and you feel that the only way out is to actually quit. But it's very nice to at least have that option and have a fairly decent chance to get a new job. I mean, I think that when I quit my last job, I had within the first 24 hours over 250 interviews. and within the first week I had already booked so many interviews and like job offerings that I was pretty much booked for two. I didn't pay for my own lunch for 2 weeks because I had that many interviews and meetings and stuff like that, and I had job offers within the first week from when I started looking for a job, for my next job basically. So with that said, I want you to also remember that if it turns out that you are reluctant to become a software engineer because you might have a bad boss, and you might or rather you're listening to these sorts of people who are telling you this sort of thing, try to think about what the person who's telling you this is actually saying. What they're actually saying isn't that this is a shitty profession. What they're telling you is that they work in a shitty place of work. What they're telling you is that they are unhappy themselves with their life situation. And that is a very fun thing, you see, because when a person who lacks self-perspective is unhappy about their situation in life, it's very, very common that they will project that misfortune onto something else. So they will say that they have a horrible manager, or they will say that they have a shitty project, or they will say that they have a shitty work process, or like they're not being paid enough, etc., etc. All these sorts of complaints are usually symptoms that they are unhappy with where they are in life. And that doesn't necessarily mean that their viewpoint of all these things is actually the accurate one. It might actually be that you can't tell, which is often the case with a lot of people, how much of your unhappiness is coming from this thing that you're blaming and how much is actually you. And your inability to either deal with emotional matters or act on things that may just be an issue because you haven't taken any concrete action towards resolving that sort of problem. This is, I would say, it's based on usually in my experience, it's based on inaction, indecision, or fear of actually doing or making choices that may result in something changing, but it also may result in a positive change for you. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you are second guessing yourself in becoming a programmer because you hear all of these programmers who complain about bad bosses, shitty projects, etc., etc., remember that these people who are stating these sorts of things, some of it is true. I mean, not every single job that you're going to have you're going to love, or every project you're not going to fall in love. That's the reality of the world, my friend. Doing work doesn't mean that you love every second of what you do. But you remember that the people who are projecting these sorts of this negative picture, they are usually probably kind of happy with their choices in life, because quite a lot of people stay programmers when they become programmers. They don't switch careers all that often, even though they may not always love every single second of what they're doing. So remember, they're still programmers. They're complaining like fuck, and that's normal. Everybody complains about something, right? But they're not switching professions. So what can you read into that? And apart from that, remember that people who are projecting negative emotions like this, or negative thoughts, they are usually in a position where they're not actually fulfilling themselves enough to act. They're not acting on any type of solution towards this, because as I said, they are programmers. If they really, really felt that this was horrible and this boss was absolute shit, and it was up to here on them, they would quit, because they have that option. Most of them will have that option, because that's how popular programmers are in the work industry today. You pretty much have the option almost always to walk away and do something else. And that is a luxury that I would argue is fairly nice to have in a world where pretty much everybody has a story about this boss or this project that was absolute shit. And that's not just programmers, it's just that programmers have the option of, as I said, walking away. Have a great day.